Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me here for this part of our program. I am very grateful for your presence. I'm going to be talking about the habit of happiness and breaking that up into, first of all, what is happiness? And then what are habits and how do we make them and break them and change them? And then moving into one of my favorite happiness habits, which is mindfulness. I may split it up into a couple of different videos depending on how long it gets, but those will be what I'm covering. So to get started, I'm going to put myself down here in the corner, and then I want to just share with you a couple of statistics, some research statistics that answer the question like why this even matters, why all of this that we're talking about, happiness and all of these habits for it and how to increase it is so important. And there are a couple studies that are relevant specifically to education, but these, of course, can be expanded out into all of our lives, right? So there was a 2-year school-based positive psychology program. Now, positive psychology is a part of psychology that seeks to optimize our experience of life. And so that is what and it's grounded in the science of happiness, which is everything that we are talking about in this series. So there was a 2-year school-based positive psychology program, so a longitudinal study, lasted a while, and at the end of it, it showed an increase for students in well-being that included more positive emotions, better peer relations, and better grade point averages, which is something we know all of our students would certainly be happy for, and we as their support systems would certainly be happy about. But even if we're not, teaching, or we're not students, or we're not in the education system, but even in our own lives, to be able to take these same ideas and increase our positive emotions and and better our relationships, who couldn't want that, right? There was another research study at UC Santa Barbara that looked at a 2-week mindfulness program, which is something I'm going to be talking about. And this program showed for students an increase in GRE scores by 30%, and that's quite significant. And so if we take that and extrapolate it to kind of all testing, then, hey, that's fabulous. Improves working memory, which who can't use that, and decreases mind wandering, which is something I'll talk more about why that might be so important to us. Okay, so those are just some things to show you that there are thousands of studies out there on all of these topics and ideas, and these are just a couple that are very relevant to education. So as we get started, what I would love you to do is just sit back and relax and take a breath, get quiet, and if you're comfortable, you might want to close your eyes for a moment. If not, that's perfectly okay. Also, maybe have something near you to write with, because the first thing I want you to do is just think about the following statement that I'm going to make. And I just want you to see what are the first words that come into your mind to fill in the blank of this statement, which is, a happy life is a blank life. So how would you fill in that blank? What are the first words that come to you that define a happy life for you? Just maybe write down anything that comes to mind. And then imagine for a moment that you are living that happy life. What does it look like? How does it feel? What does happiness really feel like for you? Feel free to turn off the video and write down some ideas for that to get a sense of how you come to this defining happiness. I'm going to talk about some ways we can and also kind of maybe the way that we're looking at it for this program. But I think it's a worthy moment to think about it for yourself. So go ahead, turn off the video if you'd like. If not, we'll move on. So here we're looking at what is happiness and how you define that. And here's an idea for it. This is a quote. This was quoted by Sean Aker, who's a Harvard researcher on happiness, but he says it comes from the ancient Greeks. So it says, the joy we feel striving for our potential. And I just thought that was lovely. The joy we feel striving for our potential. So it speaks of it as being a journey and not a destination. It also speaks of it as being something really within us, not something that we get from the outside, and that it's based on moving towards that which brings out our own best self in life, that moving towards our own individual and unique potential. And then here's a little something from Aristotle just to think about. He talked about eudaimonia, which is the doing and living well. And it defines happiness through a focus on meaning and purpose. And that self-realization piece could be that potential of our own, but to understand that potential as it's used in the world, like what is its meaning and what is its deeper purpose. So we start to see happiness as not being about being happy all the time, because that's not even realistic, but about something maybe deeper than that. And as you think about that, to consider the difference between happiness and pleasure. And then maybe even ask yourself if you or anybody you know ever seems to confuse the two. And when I ask this question of audiences, I often get, pleasure is short-term, it's short-lived. It's usually external to ourselves, something we do or have or want that we feel makes us happier. And I'm not anti-pleasure. It's just getting a sense of the difference. Where happiness is something that's a little more deeply felt. And that even though we can be unhappy at times, or we can feel sadness or anger, but that we could still have this idea of happiness within us. So taking all this into consideration, I came up with this. A state of being grounded in attributes that serve a sense of meaning and the overall well-being of the individual. So it's a state of being, something deeply within us. It has attributes or things that help grow that or create that, which is what we're going to be talking about throughout this whole series. And that those are things that serve a greater meaning in our lives as well as our own health and well-being. So you can think about that, play along with that a little bit, and see what you think. As we kind of move on to talk a little farther about the state of happiness and what are those attributes. So if you look at these, I have the words innate traits there. If you have happiness at the top of a pyramid and it's the pinnacle, have all of these other things beneath it that go into the creation of that. Now this term emotional agility, you would probably see more often as resilience, but I really like this idea of emotional agility. Resilience can feel like, I'm just going to power through. Where emotional agility has that sense of flexibility no matter what is going on, that I can be with it and move through it. Optimism, kindness, generosity, awareness, which we'll talk about with mindfulness, positive connections, so many studies that show how important that is, our relationships in our lives, and that deeper sense of purpose, right? So are these innate traits? Are these just things that you're born with? Oh my gosh, they're just always so positive and happy and resilient, and I'm not that way. Is that the case? Or are they learnable skills? Because I think we tend to think of them as fixed traits. And the truth is that we are born with different levels of these. Some infants come out certainly more agile, able to deal with surroundings and situations a little better than others, more optimistic. Some children have, higher levels of that naturally. But I want to start this out with the understanding that just like we may not be great at math starting out, that we can learn the skills of it, that we learn to ride a bike, these are just emotional skills that we can learn. And so I think there's value in understanding that these are skills. So I would like you to just think for a moment before we move on deeper into habits. Do you have any happiness habits already? Because if you think of these as learnable skills, what is a skill, something that you do, that you practice a lot, that you do over and over again until it becomes automatic? Well, it's a habit, right? That's what it is. That's how we define a habit. It's a learned behavior, something we do over and over again until it's automatic. So, do you have right now anything you would consider a happiness habit in your life? Like throughout your week on a regular basis. So this might be another place to pause the recording and think about that, or write some things down. What are your current happiness habits? And then ask yourself and be sure, are they pleasure habits or happiness habits? Now, how do you know the difference? And not that some pleasure can't lead to deeper happiness, but if it's something that a pleasure habit, once done, might leave us feeling worse or guilty or needing of wanting more of it in order to be okay. That's a pleasure habit. A happiness habit is something that really builds our ability to be emotionally agile, to be optimistic, to feel a sense of greater inner well-being. So what are your happiness habits?